So here are 5 attitudes that I believe that we need to cultivate. The first of these is, I am a human being expressing God without reservation. This is an attitude that says, who I am is particular, is individual, but I am expressing God. And therefore, I am honorable, I am worthy, I count, and I shouldn't be thinking of myself as something that is less than valuable. That's the first. The second is, I accept myself without complaint. I have a slogan that I use in my own life. It says, whenever I hear my children complaining or other people and they ask me for advice, I always say, don't complain, don't explain. Don't complain, don't explain. I accept myself without complaint. I look at the body that I'm in, and I understand that this is nothing more than my curriculum to God. There are things about it that if I were to be designing it myself, perhaps I would have done a little differently. I might have put a little extra hair on the top. I might have made myself a little taller. I might have made myself a little darker. I might have made my eyes a different color, whatever it is. But that isn't up to me. Because who I am is not this thing that I occupy. This is just a garage where I park my soul. And it doesn't matter. It is my curriculum to God. And whether it can see or can't see, whether it's in a wheelchair, whether it's 4'1" or 7'3", whether it's dark or white, whether it's living on the plains of the Kalahari, or whether it's living in New Guinea, or in Detroit, or Chicago, it doesn't make any difference. I accept myself without complaint. This is what I showed up in. And not only do I accept myself without complaint, but I accept life without complaining. And all of us have that choice, and we don't listen to that inner voice. That inner voice. I've often said that if prayer is you talking to God, then your intuition is God talking to you. And that intuition is something you want to listen to. And complaining about anything in your world, particularly about yourself, is a way of blocking the free flow of the divine intelligence that is everywhere and wants to be delivering abundance into your life. The third is, and this is a hard one for people, is I take full responsibility for my life. I take full responsibility for my life. You see, if you are disconnected or feel disconnected from the divine source, you cannot manifest. The separation is what keeps you from connecting. You can't align yourself. Not taking responsibility for your life and anything in it. And I get letters from people who feel that I shouldn't be saying this because people who have illnesses that they can't do anything about, they don't want to have to take responsibility for them. Or people who have been victims of abuse and things like this don't want to take responsibility for them. Taking responsibility doesn't mean that you feel guilty about anything that has come your way. It means that I have attracted this into my life in some way that I don't understand. It has showed up in my life. And it's my life. And I want to be able to ensure that these things don't show up anymore. And also I want to be able to send them out of my life. But I can't do it if I don't assume a kind of responsibility for them. No guilt. And the fourth one is, I take on no guilt. If to feel worthy, you don't take on guilt. Just taking on this sense of responsibility. If I get anything in my body, that if it's a hernia, if it's an ache, if it's a pain, if it were a cancer, if it were arthritis, if it's I can't sleep, if it's a cold, if it's a backache, if it's a headache, whatever it is, I am going to say, there's something in me that has attracted this. Rather than, I don't know how this happened, I'm just a victim. These kind of things happen. We live in a carcinogenic world, and these kind of things just happen. It's like the minute that you take responsibility for it, you connect to the divine source, which can heal it. The minute that you say, I had nothing to do with this, then you put that barrier up there and you're disconnected from the healing of it. So I'm not talking, I want to re-emphasize, I'm not talking about feeling guilty about it. I'm talking about saying, it's here, I've experienced it, I can do something with it. I can either go back to that stage of being an athlete and being a warrior and say, it's all in my ego, or I can do something profound about it, which is to say I can teach and become a statesman and a spiritual being by teaching others how to avoid having this happen. It came to me for a reason. I don't have to understand it, but I take responsibility for it. No guilt, no abdicating the person who was responsible for it and saying, oh, it wasn't their fault. None of that. No removal of the punishment that the person deserved for that kind of conduct. None of that. Simply taking responsibility and saying, I now connect to whatever it is that's in my life, and I no longer am going to carry around the anguish and the guilt there, any place in my life. As soon as you do that, you honor your worthiness to receive the healing, to receive the abundance, to receive the love that might have been missing from your life. The fifth and final affirmation or attitude to create for ourselves a sense of being worthy is to have congruency in your life. Congruency. I understand the importance of harmony between my thoughts, my feelings, and my behaviors. Very often, most of the problems that we face as people come from our inability to have congruency or harmony exist between what I think, what I feel, and how I behave. I may think one thing, I may feel something else, and then behave in a different way. And to have a congruency is to honor your worthiness. Virtually all addictions come from an incongruency. I have a thought about one thing, I feel something else, and then I behave in a different way. And that incongruency is what keeps us from feeling worthy. Whenever you're about to act, to do anything, if you have any conflict at all, you can ask yourself the question, is what I'm about to say, is what I'm about to do going to bring me peace, more peace in my life, or is it going to bring a sense of turmoil? Is there going to be some struggle, some anxiety as a result of what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do? If the answer is peace, then it's your highest self. If the answer is turmoil, struggle, anxiety, stress, then the answer is your ego. So now you've identified, and now you know how to act. The way to act is with the way that will bring you peace. Even if it seems inconsistent, the way to act is the way that will bring you peace. The second thing to do is to start to learn to go beyond this restriction that you've experienced in the physical plane. The restrictions of the physical plane are many. Begin to say, I can transcend that. In your mind, begin to look at yourself as living in that physical plane, but that's not who you are. So figure out ways in your own consciousness to just get past all of these limitations that are a part of your body and your world. The third is, wherever you go, refuse to defend yourself to anyone or to anything on the earth plane. You don't have to defend yourself. You don't have to prove yourself. You can just quietly be an effective human being and not get yourself into that position where you're arguing with someone over the rightness of how you feel. Just let go of that. And the higher part of you is saying, I want peace. I want peace. It's always there. Keep that in mind. And finally, learn to surrender and to trust in that wisdom that created you. The act of surrendering is letting go, detaching yourself from all of the beliefs that you have that it's important for you to be right and it's important for you to prove other people wrong and all of these kinds of things that keep you sort of in that restriction. Once you surrender and once you let go, you find yourself a whole lot freer in your life. To understand that you have a higher self and to know it and be aware of it is one thing, but to trust in it is quite something else. And the ways to put this principle into practice are, first of all, to keep in mind that you cannot go to a higher ground if you're hanging on to a lower level. That in order to get yourself to a higher place, a place of trust, you have to somehow recognize that all of the stuff that's going on in your life in a lower place is something you have to let go of. You have to trust that when you do let go, you're not going to be falling into the abyss. And I would recommend that you take a real rebellious attitude toward the philosophy which preaches that you are not connected to the divine energy, that somehow this force that has many names is something that is outside of you, and you're not deserving of it. Until you know that you can trust in it, you can't use it and acknowledge it in your life. One of the things to do to practice this trust is to take the most serious problem that you have and turn it over to God. Affirm to yourself, I would like to show my trust in the divine force by simply turning my problems over to your divine hands. I can remember doing this with some of the things that I really struggled with at one time in my life, things that I just thought I couldn't get past. I remember going through relationship difficulties. I remember going through problems with drinking and things like this, where it just seemed like I wanted to get past it, and I just didn't know quite what to do. I can remember times when I would be stuck in my writing and not sure whether I could, and I would just stop and I would just say, all right, I'm going to turn this over. I'm going to trust. I'm going to trust. I'm going to surrender. And this concept of surrender is very, very important. So when you do this, it's just that simple act of getting down on your knees and staying there on your knees and just say, okay, I'm going to turn this over to something that is higher within myself. And the ego seems to go away, and the solution seems to be there for you. The presence of complete trust is evident in your life when you start to think and feel and do are all balanced and they're all in harmony. This is called congruence. If you're congruent, your thoughts and your feelings and your behavior are all in harmony. If you're incongruent, you have one thought about, gee, I'd like to be able to do this, but then you feel another way about it, and then you act in a completely different way. And this is the cause of most of the struggles in our life, and it's also the thing that impedes the free flow of the divine force into your life. You have to trust in yourself. When you're trusting in yourself, you're trusting in this very wisdom that is the source of your life. And when you are congruent within and are feeling congruent, you are also beginning to act congruent. So work on congruency and look at the areas in your life in which you feel yourself to be incongruent. What do I think about this, and how do I feel, and how do I act? And try to bring them into harmony. And you'll start accessing this trust that is absolutely essential to the manifesting process. And of course, as always, you have to begin a meditation practice of contemplating the supreme principle which is beyond the pettiness of this world. And as you meditate and go within and you make conscious contact with God, God isn't something that you know about any longer. God is something that you know directly and personally. And once you have this direct conscious contact, this knowing, then trust is not anything that you'll ever have to work on again.
You want the truth of who you believe you are to mesh with what you're projecting outward. If this is unsuccessful, you're aware of it, even if you opt to ignore it. The imbalance surfaces in your daily interactions, showing up in feelings of being upset, out of sorts, confused, and often misunderstood. My intentions are good, so why is it that no one else sees it this way? And I try to be a good employee, a good father, a good citizen, and a good husband, but I always seem to be misconstrued or misjudged. This results in a continual state of frustration and even anger. You need to make a decision to realign yourself on an energetic basis to get the scales balanced between your idealized self and your realized self, as perceived by the majority of people in your life. Restoring the balance through realignment. When you balance the way you want to be with the way you're being received, there's a distinctly pleasurable feeling of being in harmony with life. It's not that you're seeking approval or groveling for respect or love. It's more that you're in the world in a way that's congruent with your inner desires to be the kind of person you are. You accomplish this by first noticing when you're feeling misperceived, then determining if your words and actions match the truth of your inner thoughts. This alignment check will eventually and almost automatically give you a reading that compares what you're projecting outwardly with what you're inwardly wanting to express. Let's take a look at some of these indices. This alignment check calls for self-honesty along with a willingness to experience radical humility in the process. 1. I am a loving human being. If you both desire and believe this to be true about yourself, then you're 2/3 of the way toward being in balance on this principle. Your desire to be a loving person, and at the same time, your truth that you are a loving person, leaves only the third element, how others perceive you. Here are some ways of being that are counterproductive to being perceived as a loving human being and create an imbalance. Having a strong position of hatred toward anyone or any group of people, you're out of balance. Violence in any form, including aggressive verbal outbursts, you're out of balance. Support for weapons designed to produce megadeath explosions, you're out of balance. You enjoy being entertained by films portraying hatred and killing, you're out of balance. Verbally belittling others' beliefs and insisting that your beliefs are superior, you're out of balance. Let your thoughts of love become the driving force behind your unloving behaviors. This is true alignment. Begin looking at the world as a vast mirror reflecting back to you exactly what you are. If you truly are a loving human being, the world will look like a loving place to you, and this will be how you will be perceived. You will have restored balance, and consequently, there will be no discrepancy between how you see yourself and what the world is reflecting back to you. If the world continues to look like an unloving and unlivable place, I urge you to keep examining the kind of energy that you're projecting outward. 2. I am a kind human being. You cannot be kind to me and unkind to your waiter and be in balance. When you persistently extend arrogance outward in the direction of other people, even if you feel justified in your actions, that's how you're perceived and defined. You need to know that you're not coming across as a balanced, kind person. You may indeed exemplify kindness in how you treat your children and your grandmother, and even all of the children and all of the grandmothers of the world. But if you honk your horn in a red-faced anger at a slow-driving grandmother who's taking her grandchildren to school, then you're way, way, way out of balance. If you see yourself as desirous of being a kind person, then consciously spend time daily aligning your thoughts with your desire. The universe will cooperate, bringing you more and more of that same kindness. 3. I am a joyful, happy human being. In this category, your feelings are the measurement you need to pay attention to. In fact, they require your undivided attention. Do you feel happy and content, or are you easily outraged over the misconduct of others? Does your joy turn quickly to despair when you read the newspapers or listen to the news? Do people around you really think that you're a happy camper in your daily life? Do you regularly hear others telling you to lighten up or chill out and stop letting yourself get so worked up? These are clues indicating the balance or imbalance between how you see yourself and what you project to others. The alignment check for this principle involves noticing your feelings and your ability to sustain them, along with feedback from people you trust. And 4. I am a non-judgmental human being. If you're truly non-judgmental, then it will be impossible for you to categorize or generalize individuals into groups such as old, Southern, uneducated, teeny boppers, belonging to red or blue states, conservatives, liberals, and so on. A stereotype is a judgment. You cannot be non-judgmental and be critical of the different ways people talk or eat or dress, socialize, dance, or anything else. If you believe that you're non-judgmental but admit that you have a tendency to generalize and criticize, then you're out of balance. You're due for a realignment so that your current thoughts and ultimately your behaviors will become a vibrational match to your inner self-portrait. Make a conscious decision to look for what is right and pleasing in others. Create a new habit of complimenting those around you. Decide that you're going to disregard stereotypes and refuse to engage in conversations that dwell on judging anyone. Turn judgments into blessings to restore the imbalance between how you want to be and how you're actually presenting yourself to the world. Rebalance this energy by sending a silent blessing to the person. On the non-judgmental side of the balance scale, think about how much love and support this person could use. I guarantee that you'll feel the difference internally and at the same time feel more compassionately connected to that individual. The energy of non-judgment is totally balanced as opposed to the energy of contempt, pity, or some other negative option. Become aware of all of your behaviors and feelings. Then attempt to determine if they match your vision of yourself and if that self-image is what others see. You'll immediately feel discord when you discover imbalance, and that's when you can choose to change habits to match your desires and restore equilibrium to your life. In reading the aphorisms of Patanjali, he was talking, now you have to remember we're talking about before the Middle Ages, which were called the Dark Ages. And here was Patanjali writing about the ability to be able to do absolutely miraculous things. the ability to be able to be in more than one place at the same time, the ability to be able to be in the presence of another human being and raise your energy to such a level that you could literally, by your presence alone, just heal that person. The ability to be able to transcend things like diseases. The ability to be able to have the gift of fish and loaves. To just live at such a level of consciousness that anything you placed your attention on instantaneously, you had the capacity and the power to be able to make that realization for you. The book is called How to Know God. Now, it's not called How to Know About God. It's not called How to Believe in God. It's called How to Know God. And How to Know God means making conscious contact with God. It's the only way you can know anything. So here are the 5 aphorisms. The first is called, "The central act of ignorance is false identification." The central act of ignorance is called false identification. What does Patanjali mean by false identification? And what does he mean by ignorance? Ignorance is not to be assumed to mean that you are uninformed. It means that you are identifying yourself as a human being with your body and your possessions and this material world. And the central act of that ignorance is the identification falsely with this world of the changing. But beyond the world of the changing is the changeless world. And once you start to identify yourself there and know that this is who you are, know it, like you're listening right now and you're watching, and the energy that is coming into you is coming through your eyes and ears and senses. And it is only your eyes and your ears and your senses that take this energy and twist it into something called evil or problems. It comes into your eyes, these energies, and into your ears. If it could be examined just before it hits your eyes, and just before it reaches your ears, and we could examine it very carefully, you would find that the scientists would say, no, there's no problems in that energy. There's no evil in that energy. Nope, it's just energy. It's just a frequency. It's vibrating at a certain speed. But as soon as it hits your senses and you begin to interpret it, problems begin to show up in your life. But the energy itself contains no problems. It's just energy. That's proper identification according to Patanjali. That's the first aphorism. The second aphorism sounds like this. The mind of the truly illumined, said Patanjali, is calm, because the peace of God within all things is known, even within the appearance of misery and disease. Even within the appearance of misery and disease. The mind of the truly illumined is always calm. And the mind of the truly illumined understands that the peace of God is in all things. You are in this world, but what? You are not of this world. That is not who you are. You are not of this world, even though you're in it. So you're filling out the forms, you send in your money to the IRS, and you stop at the red lights, and you obey the laws, and you follow the rules, that is, most of them, which seem to make sense, and the ones that don't, you're able to ignore, which you have to, otherwise we'll never have any growth. The third aphorism is quite simple, and it's one that's most troubling to many people in the West. Patanjali said, sin is non-existent. Sin is non-existent. There are only obstacles to one's ultimate union with God. You do not sin. When you behave toward another person in a harmful way, when you steal from another person, when you violate any of the commandments or whatever, you have not sinned. You have created an obstacle to your union with God. You see, the reason we don't want to put sin in there, according to Patanjali, is because it creates shame and guilt. Shame computes the absolute lowest in whether you're going to be strong or weak in your life. Shame is the lowest frequency emotion that is possible. It only computes at 25 on a scale of 1 to 1,000. The fourth aphorism that leads us into a spiritual solution to every problem sounds like this. And these last two are the ones that I absolutely resonate to and love the most. The person who is steadfast in his abstention from falsehood has the power to obtain for himself and others the fruits of good deeds without having to perform the deeds themselves. Steadfast in abstaining from means that you never waver and you never have thoughts of falsehood, that is, identifying yourself as a material being rather than a spiritual being. And when you become steadfast in that, when you say to someone, God blesses you, they are blessed by your presence when you have that kind of consciousness. And you present yourself to someone and you are absolutely steadfast in abstention from falsehood. And in the presence of such a person, healing takes place. And blessing takes place. And the fifth aphorism, my favorite of all, says, when a person is steadfast in his abstention from harming others, then all living creatures will cease to feel enmity in his or her presence. So when you become steadfast in your abstention from ever having a thought of harm directing at other people, and that's how you walk through the world, butterflies will land on your shoulder. Birds will not be afraid of you. Little dogs, or even vicious dogs, will become domesticated by being in your presence. All living creatures, babies, will goo-goo and come to you. You know people like this, don't you? And what you'll do is set into motion these dormant forces, which will collaborate with you because you're in spirit rather than in form.